Max Gorlin, Melbourne Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
This is Nat Fyfe from the Fremantle Footy Club.
Trent Cotchin from the Richmond Footy Club.
Scott Pendlebury from the Collingwood Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Patrick Cooch from the Carlton Footy Club.
It's Rory Sloane here from the Adelaide Crows.
This is Tom Mitchell from the Hawthorn Footy Club, and you're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Hey friends, you got MJ from the Coaches Panel. I hope you're well. Welcome back to another episode of the 50 Most Relevant, where we work our way through who I think are the most relevant players to talk about in fantasy footy for 2022. So regardless of the salary cap format you play, there's something here for you. We love having different guests from across the fantasy footy community. He's a regular in the preseason, one you really want to get into their content that he gives right throughout the preseason. If you play KFC SuperCoach, the Phantom is the man to know. Hello, mate. It's good to have you back on the podcast.
Pleasure, MJ. Thanks for having me. Always look forward to this time of year. As you know, you've had some amazing guests, as you tweeted last week already for the top 50, and then you've thrown in me. So good to see. Hopefully I don't let everyone down.
No, Phantom, you've never let anyone down. Of course, there's plenty of great stuff coming. If you're on Twitter, it's at the Phantom FC, SC. That make sure you go and check him out. He's brilliant. All the Twitter links have got attached in the description of this podcast, so you can go and check it out, whether it be on the Adelaide Advertiser, the Herald Sun. He and the rest of the gang at KFC SuperCoach are putting out a mountain of work, especially with the format open. And before we talk any more too about Sam Walsh, who we are discussing this episode of the 50 Most Relevant, just a little tip for you. If you want to get SuperCoach Plus, all the benefits that come with that, why don't you check out codesports.com.au? It's got everything you need, whether it be SuperCoach related or just footy in general. Get yourself a free month subscription, a bunch of other stuff. Again, we'll put the links in the description of this podcast, but codesports.com.au is the place to check out your sporting content, let alone SuperCoach content in 2022. Well, Sam Walsh, who would have thought? A phenomenal start to his career, just 21 years of age, and has not made a misstep in his 3 seasons at the Carlton Footy Club. Last year, career high numbers for him across every single format of the game. 155 versus the Magpies in AFL Fantasy and DreamTeam. It's a career high score from him. And in SuperCoach, that same game, career number, 193. Yeah, super close this dude is to getting to the 200 club. In that format of KFC SuperCoach, an average of 117. So we're going to be paying $637,100 for him. While in AFL Fantasy and DreamTeam, his average of 108.9 sees him priced in fantasy at $914,000, while it's just a touch under $930K in DT. And Phantom, pretty much from day one, in every single format, for pretty much every single game he's played, Sam Walsh has lived up to this incredibly hyped first round player and number 1 draft pick from just a couple of years ago.
Indeed, he has. MJ, you mentioned there at the top, who would have predicted the breakout last year? If you are a long-time listener of the Phantoms Lair podcast, you would have heard me talk about Sam Walsh last year. I jumped on from round 1. It all happened midway through his second season in 2020. We know how good he was on the outside in his first year and a half in the comp, but his inside game at the top level developed dramatically in that second season. And as he pushed into the midfield and that on-ball rotation for the Blues, really showed what he could do, average 110 plus in the run home of 2020, and just went to another level in 2021.
He was incredible. You mentioned these last 8 games. Here's what he's able to score for us across the formats. In KFC SuperCoach, 114, 123, 98, 113, 132, 161, 84, and 119. That average of 118, very reflective, like you said, of what he's just given us in the year just gone. While in AFL Fantasy, it was an average of 89 due to the shortened quarters. 80 was the 100 in that format of 2020, and it was 85, 95, 67, 88, 96, 114, 95, and 77. You want to play the adjusted average game? Fine. That's a 111. So right around what he did. And last year, you're right, in 2021, he lived out that back end of 2020 brilliantly. Ranked 6th in the league for handballs per game, 9th for total disposals, 10th for uncontested possessions. That speaks to work rate. 7th for effective disposal. So when he gets it, he doesn't screw around with it. And 19th in score involvements per game. 28 29 disposals per game, 7 score involvements, 5 tackles, 5 clearances. You're right, Phantom. The inside game arrived as a complement to that outside game. And we saw it in his KFC SuperCoach numbers last year. He put up 15 tons, and pretty much every single one of them was a 120 plus, Phantom.
It was. And if you go back further, if you include that back half of 2020 that we just spoke about, in his past 30 games, 22 KFC SuperCoach tons, 15 of them in excess of 120. And in that extraordinary run of form, he's both an average of 116. So, and before that, he only played 28 games of AFL footy. So right now we sit here, 21, he's played 58 games and he's put up those remarkable numbers. So, natural improvement alone, where can he go from here?
Yeah, and I think that's what's got people so excited about such a top line performer already. And he's entering into the 4th year, and it's generally the 4th, 5th, and 6th seasons that players really establish themselves, not just as the breakout player, but as the real top end uber elite premiums. And if he's already arguably there after 3 years, gosh, what he could be is what's got people excited. In KFC SuperCoach last year, ranked 9th for total points, so ahead of Rory Laird, Christian Petrarca, and Zach Merritt, and only 4 points off of Tom Mitchell. That's how good of a season he had. Ranked 10th for averages, while in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team, an average of 108.9 has him 12th for averages in that format, 10th overall for points, and that's off the back of 16 tons, 8 over 120 and 2 over 130, including that 155. To go with this incredible scoring trajectory that he's on is he hasn't missed a game of footy, and he's so complete. He wins the inside ball. He wins the outside ball. He does the defensive stuff. He works hard off the ball as much as he does on the ball. And I think the only cause for concern, Phantom, that I think people might have is we did see probably 2 games last year where he got a tag. It was round 14 against the Giants, where he got the 55 in Dream Team and Fantasy, the 71 KFC SuperCoach points, while a couple of weeks later against North Melbourne in round 19, 72 in Dream Team and Fantasy, the 81 KFC SuperCoach points. I suppose that's the only hesitancy some may have towards starting with him, is seeing that even though he is still young, he is still susceptible to a tag.
It's a good point. And I think, though, the counter to that is at times last year, he also showed that he can work through that. He was tagged a couple of times, and he did break through for a 3-figure score, because he can outrun most players in the competition already. So I think his sheer work rate and his want, his desire, and naturally he's going to mentally know how to deal with that close attention as well going forward. So I think, yes, there still is that threat, but also what's going to help him this year is the addition of Adam Chera, George Hewitt maybe in particular, who we know he went quite defensively at the Swans, played across half back as well. But, he's going to give Sam Walsh some more support in the centre square there as well. We still got Patrick Cripps around. So I just think, it's going to be a tough day if you're trying to tag Sam Walsh. Opposition midfielders already know it's going to be a tough day lining up against him, just the way he runs. He's going to outwork most players in the competition.
Yeah, look, he's brilliant. I think you bring up a really great point around George Hewitt. I think and Chera both only complement Sam Walsh. I know some are a little apprehensive about what it does. Hewitt means coming into that centre bounce rotation, which is why I think they've got him. They don't need another half back. We talked about this earlier in the 50 most relevant when Hewitt was included in. He's there to bring that defensive work rate and pressure. That means Walsh is freed up to not have to be as dual focused, but can be even more offensively minded, while Chera takes more of that outside role. And I think that only means good news for Walsh owners, which is Cripps is the bull at the contest, Walsh is the complete package, Chera's on the outside, and Hewitt's the defensive-minded mid. It feels like a really elite 4 in terms of the core elements for Michael Voss to really work with. So for me, I love what Sam Walsh could bring. And then I think that, and it's not an uncommon trait, but I think if you think that Carlton are going to improve, well, statistically, there's some good signs for you in that as well. In the 8 wins that he was involved with last year for Carlton, in KFC SuperCoach, he averaged 132.8. In contrast to the 14 losses in the format, he averaged just the 108.1. So you're talking a differential of just shy of 25 points per game. While in Dream Team and Fantasy, the split's not as big, but it's equally as impressive. In losses, the average of 102.7, but in wins, 119.9. Those are captaincy level options. And I suppose that's really, if we are going to jump on Sam Walsh Phantom, he's probably one of those, whether he's an M2, M3, M4, if you're picking him to start, I think you're thinking he's one of those guys you could put the rolling VC or C on most weeks. Otherwise, you're probably overpaying for it.
Yeah, I agree. And you mentioned that 132 point average. That is key. We think Carlton should have been more than 8 games this year. And, you add that to the Hewitt and Cheryl we just spoke about, and then just his natural improvement in the 4th year. You're right. It all comes down to who else you're going to pick. 637K. How many 600K midfielders can you start in SuperCoach? That is the big question. Are you going to pick him ahead of a Jack Steele? Are you going to pick him ahead of a Clayton Oliver? That could be the big question. But, some of those guys we might have seen the level they're at.
Yes,
I think
true.
with Walsh, there's still unknown in a good way about where he can get to with Carlton developing as a better side.
Yeah, look, I think you're bang on the point there. Is he has to be in consideration for everybody. He is going to be, and has been already for the better part of his 3 years in the AFL. He's going to be a part of the conversation every single year. He's a premium midfielder. I believe he's going to be a top 10 guy across the formats, not just again this year, but for the better part of the next decade. He's there and thereabouts always. There's no fault in his game. He is a brilliant footballer. And the only reason you're probably not starting him is you like somebody else at a comparable price a little bit more than him, because there's no knock to his game that I feel is valid. You're right. The tags he's worked and working through, the wins, the support around him, everything, his trajectory is that he's going to continue to be one of the best fantasy midfielders in all of the formats. And on draft day, it's going to be interesting to see where he goes. And I'm keen on your take in a minute, Phantom, to see what people structurally do. We've got some really big new forwards in the game with Duncan and Taranto. We've still got a really nice haul of midfielders and defenders. And even in the rucks, I don't think you can discount the greatness of Grundy and Gawn even through there. So I think he's going to be someone's M1. But is he a first round selection in a draft for you, Phantom, or would you be happy to pick him at some point in the 2nd or maybe even 3rd round if you got that far?
I think you'd still probably take him. He's good enough, and he's probably going to average enough to be taken, I think, still in the first 10 to 13 or 14 selections. The first 5 or 6 midfielders taken. So if you're not getting a big ruckman or the best forward, 3 or 4 picks maybe, that you're probably taking midfielders. He probably fits into that 5 or 6 gun midfielders that you take if you're not getting a positional. And again, if you're playing in a keeper league format, you're playing keeper KFC SuperCoach draft, you'd probably take him even higher than that. He could go past some of these other guys, and in dynasty formats, dynasty drafts, I should say, in all formats, you take him pretty high, I would have thought.
Yeah, look, for me, and I know a fellow coaches panelists came right throughout the offseason, we did our top 50 keeper and dynasty ranks. And look, our Patreons know exactly where we have him, but you're right, Phantom. It's right towards the pointy end. If you've got one of those early picks in a keeper or a dynasty league, he is one of the first you want to get. Hey, Phantom, appreciate your work on this episode today.
Pleasure, MJ. Thanks for having me back.
Absolute pleasure. If you're loving the work of KFC SuperCoach and all the content they're delivering, some big new changes have come in the game. All the details, you can go and check him out on Twitter at the Phantom SC. Content dropping almost every single day at the Adelaide Advertiser, the Herald Sun, or like I said, if you want to get yourself a subscription to codesports.com.au, you also get all the benefits of SuperCoach Plus involved in it. So make sure you go and check all that out. The links are in the description of this podcast. Tomorrow, we continue our journey through the 50 most relevant. So if you're just kicking into your preseason now, we're at 18 today. There are a heap more players to go back and check out. All the links for that are at coachespanel.tv. There is an article there for every single player revealed so far, as well as a daily podcast, just like this one on every single one of these players. Make sure you check it out over Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And you can really do some great stuff to support the Coaches Panel. It helps us do this sort of content year round. All you can do is join our Patreon supporter group. All the links for that are at coachespanel.tv with a heap of exclusive content, access, and prizes involved. Well, tomorrow we continue on the journey of the 50 most relevant. Number 17 for this guy. He picked up an additional position in the off-season. He arguably had a career high 2021. But when I look at the ownership percentages and then I look at what he's done, man, why is everybody off this guy who's one of the most reliable players across every single format of the game? Who is he? You'll find out tomorrow on the 50 most relevant.
Give it all, now give it truth, give it up, give it